grants were the thing you would hear all the time before, especially in bull markets. A lot of teams realized that, oh, wait, the market conditions are excellent. We have a lot of surplus funding. That program is running a grants program. We should run one too. We should try to do what they're doing. So there was a lot of copycat models where there was no thought process that went into why we should have a program in the first place. It was, we should have a program. Of course we're going to have a program. The way that you could actually build visibility in the past was you really hustle on Twitter, and there were financial incentives to do that too, especially in the last year with InfoFi platforms. They wanted to get visibility in front of other, again, people who are crypto native, and so that's what they would achieve, is just visibility, right, and awareness. It was the first level of marketing, if you will, and that's what they were focused on. Is that a great metric? Can it be gamed? 100%. The end of last year, the timeline was terrible because all I saw was AI slop and people trying to game that system to get more financial returns.
GM, and welcome to the OGC podcast, where we go deep with the people actually building and marketing the future of crypto. Today, we have Mashal Waqar, CMO at Octant, one of the most interesting experiments in funding, grants, and general ecosystem growth that is happening in Web3 right now. We're unpacking how we're rethinking what grants can be. And yeah, super excited to have you on, Mashal. Welcome to the OGC podcast.
Thank you for having me. Big fan, and always a fan of anything that you do. So I'm excited to be here.
That's kind words there. Yeah, it's really cool to chat with you. I know you guys have had some pretty interesting announcements this week, so there's a lot to chat about. But why don't we kick it off by you giving a quick introduction about yourself, your background, and some words on what you do at Octant.
Absolutely. So I'm Mashal, and also thank you for pronouncing my last name correct. Most people butcher one or the other or both. So it's rare to actually hear someone say it the right way without asking me, which is a big one.
I took a risk there. I just tried.
You were good. You were great. It's spot on exactly how we pronounce it. But I'm Mashal. I am a marketer, and a little bit about me. I have a security background, had no business being in media, but ended up in it and became a serial entrepreneur accidentally. And through that, learned how to scale things, build audiences, and understand how to make people connect through content, through storytelling, and understood how to reverse engineer virality across platforms. And through that, I built startups in media, in D2C, femtech, and had an audience building consultancy. And that was when I got crypto pilled. I mean, I had actually, I'd say like the first time I got into crypto was through Bitcoin in 2015, and was anonymously writing articles, raising awareness about what Bitcoin is. And I was I don't know, I just didn't feel comfortable writing my name in student-run publications, and would organize workshops where we could learn stuff. And then got back to the Ethereum ecosystem through DAOs when DAOs were in their glory days, and got to do some really interesting, fun work with a bunch of what were the big names of that time. And that led me down this route of public goods and grants, and ended up co-authoring and researching grants in this industry because everyone had a grants program, and it felt like everyone has funding, but what is happening in these programs? Where does all this money go? Why is it a black hole? So really ended up understanding how things were being run, what was happening, in probably one of the most comprehensive reports. Did that for a couple of years, and that's still the most referenced report in grants funding. Ended up doing a lot more research on that front and joined Octant, where I started marketing what Octant was. And I'm sure we'll get to talk about it, but essentially found my way into what I considered one of the most underrated projects in Ethereum.
Wow. Yeah. Super impressive. True OG, it seems, really deep, which is cool because you're deeply embedded in even research, but you also have a marketing lens and a marketing sense, and you can articulate and communicate things to the public as well. So yeah, that's why I'm excited to unpack all of this with you. I think, before we maybe talk about grants and funding public goods and what this actually means in the ecosystem, in the past, today, and maybe the future. I would love to maybe dive into Octant for a minute, and maybe you can explain this to us as if we're not blockchain experts, and yeah, maybe share what the vision and the mission is behind Octant.
Absolutely. So I'll start with what our mission used to be before and what we were solving for before, which was we had a very interesting funding model. And that was if you have, like, let's just call it, if you don't understand crypto, maybe you have experience with a certain kind of cryptocurrency. So if you had a cryptocurrency called GLM, you could use it on our platform where it gets locked. And in every 3 month cycles, you get back ETH, which is a different cryptocurrency. And the cool thing about it is that it's almost like basically yield on top of your investment, right? So you're using the yield that's being generated to either for your own gain, you can withdraw the ETH that you get, or you can allocate it to, and give it to an impactful project in Ethereum. Why would you want to do that? If you are part of the industry and you are part of the ecosystem, there probably are projects that you think, you know what, I think this should get funded. Somebody should fund them because these are important for the growth of this ecosystem that I believe in and this technology that I think has a lot of potential. So instead of using your funding to directly do that, you can just use your yield to help guide a matching fund. And normally the way decisions are made in any, historical organization is you have big pools of money, you have a small group of people behind the scenes who make decisions on how this should be deployed and how this should be given out. We've changed the model where community decision maker can have a say in how this big pool of capital can now be split up and who can get funded. And so that was a model that we had early on and that we tested out and ran a lot of experiments in for the first 2.5 years. And it wasn't just projects in Ethereum. We funded climate projects, we funded media projects. We ran a lot of experiments to understand what would people be inclined and incentivized to taking action for, what would make them want to participate, what would they feel strongly about, what kind of things do they want to see if they do want to give their yield, because this is altruistic to want to give back. So what if what's going to incentivize that? And it's totally okay if you don't want to do that. We never had any pressure for any users to do that, but we just saw a lot of cool people and just a lot of community support for a lot of the projects. And so that's what we did. And then at the end of last year, we thought all of this funding has come through Golem Foundation's staked ETH. So they had 100,000 ETH that they staked, and they've been generous enough to want to see Ethereum grow, and that's where Octant actually started. Octant Labs now is um, an independent entity that we have started, and that was a big announcement this year, which is we are now real and we have an ambitious big mission now, which is to solve a lot of Ethereum's sustainability challenges. We realize that this sustainable model of use yield to fund operations and growth is a really, really interesting one. And so our mission now is to do a lot more of that and to get better at that. And in that process, we've built tools in DeFi where, for folks who, again, like if other ecosystems want to follow our model, they can do that. We have the tech that is now exists because of the wallets that we've built. So if you're an ecosystem with a treasury and you think, you know what, I want to use yield to fund my own marketing budgets, you can do that. If you want to run grant programs, you can do that. So there's a lot of different things we're doing. The vaults are our first product, but we have this community model that we have been able to play around with and to run rounds on is also going to be open to different ecosystems. And on the other side, there's a lot of, like I said, because it's really important for us to understand how do you not just give out capital, but how do you understand that it's being effectively used, that you're funding the right things. There's a lot more research and work that's being done, and there's going to be a lot of funding, both experiments and models that are going to be running this upcoming year. And all of that comes back to wanting to see Ethereum thrive at a time where crypto sentiment is all-time low and there's a lot of bearish sentiments. We see ourselves as one of the bastions in the industry who are going to help change that.
I love that. That's amazing. So you said this is open, or like you're interested to also partner up with other ecosystems. Does this mean beyond like you're tapping beyond Ethereum with this new setup, or did I
So
get this?
Ethereum is the starting point, but I see the potential of this technology to be adopted by real world. Well, Ethereum is real world too, but non-crypto organizations too.
Hmm.
100%. And I come from the media space, so I saw how much there was a lack of funding. And a lot of times, even if communities were coming together, even when it comes to business models that are not sustainable, there are so many different areas of impact, even that could benefit from this. And if you think about traditional, even nonprofit orgs, how are they using their capital? And how are they even deploying it? Like, there's so many use cases that I think this has the potential to work for. And so I see our work as being outside of Ethereum, even if that is what we're starting with first.
Okay, cool. And yeah, I think what would be interesting to is to get your take on. You mentioned grants, you mentioned public goods, you mentioned funding mechanisms. So yeah, maybe before we zoom a little bit further into what you guys do on a day to day, would be curious to get your take on grants and funding public goods, and why does it matter, and why is specifically in crypto and the blockchain space a big thing. To me, it feels like it used to be an even bigger thing. I don't hear grants as a term as much as maybe 3, 5 years ago. So yeah, maybe you can take us with you, explain grants, why they matter so much, how you see them evolve, etc.
Absolutely. You're right. Grants were the thing you would hear all the time before, especially in bull markets. And what I learned was that some programs started to build developer ecosystems. So a lot of times, even before grants, they were called bounties. So you would have a bounty, could
Yeah.
be a security bounty for a developer to try to hack into something you've built to make it more secure. Or it might be smaller bounties for specific purposes. Then we saw that evolve to a grants program that was more encompassing. And Gitcoin really pioneered that model and ran with it, where they saw a lot of success. If you were in this industry at that time, you probably would have participated in a community funding round. Um, and so grants started as a tool to build your developer ecosystem for that project. And think about it, if you're non crypto, like if you have built a software and you want more people to make, yeah, to develop that more, like what would you do, right? So you would run a grants program, and that's just how you would attract and market to developers, was through these grants. Now, very quickly, a lot of teams realized that, oh, wait, the market conditions are excellent. We have a lot of surplus funding. That program is running a grants program. We should run one too. We should try to do what they're doing. So there was a lot of copycat models where there was no thought process that went into why we should have a program in the first place. It was, we should have a program. Of course, we're going to have a program. And so we saw hundreds of millions of dollars being given out in grants funding. And it was kind of crazy because I don't think there's maybe AI is that next field where you're seeing a lot of capital being put into, but it really was a time where it was so easy to get a grant from any ecosystem, even for minimal work,
Yeah.
and that's how a lot of this started. Over the years, though, programs, ecosystems, and just people who've been running these have become a lot better and sophisticated in how they're running it. So it would be a very general grant before. Now is a grant where you need to show results. Can't just be an idea. You need to actually show that you can deliver the value you're promising, and there's a lot more accountability. There's a lot more roadblocks, and um, yeah, it's just a lot more scope that's clear now, right? We can't just say, "Hey, I have an idea. I deserve a lot of funding." No, you need to show that you can deliver results, and so we've seen that evolution, and it was just it was inevitable because the industry is maturing and there's a lot more questions being asked now. Decision makers are accountable as well for the decisions and funding that they're given out, right? So I think that was just part of the process. And with the bear market and with a lot of crypto projects suffering and budgets being completely pulled back, we've seen the result of what that is, which is essentially we don't see as many grants anymore. And if there are grants, they're so specific around what they're for. I think we're one of the maybe last two projects that give more open-ish grants, and even we've tightened our scope for how our model works.
Yeah, and ultimately, I mean, from my understanding, this is really, as you said, it's an exercise to track developers to build in your ecosystem, right? So
Mhm.
it's a function of developer marketing, and I guess the industry, and I want to tap into how many L1s do we need, and like and all that stuff. But I guess the ecosystem just matures, and the VCs of these ecosystem mature, and I guess you guys have been at the forefront of that whole development.
Yeah, it's been very cool to see because I think the other question that I would always ask is you've got a small pool of people and you have all these programs trying to throw money at them to attract that same exact pool. That is not sustainable.
Yeah.
That is not sustainable at all. And so the real focus now, and I think some ecosystems are doing a much better job of it, are the ones who have become more sophisticated in looking at different angles for who will use this technology and how can they use it. And I think there's now more conversations from the stage one to stage two of, all right, what does traction look like? How can we keep funding that and whatnot? And I think that's cool to see.
Yeah. Do you want to, do you want to, I'm not sure if you're comfortable, but like, don't have to call out specific brands, chains, whatever. But do you want to make it a little more tangible? Like what is good best practices? And maybe that also already leads us into what you're building with your platform, but what is best practices where I'm trying to like get to the gist of it, like who is doing it right or how are people doing it right today? What are like 2, 3 best practices that you see that, you know, the industry came to that maybe wasn't the case 5 years ago?
Do you mean just from a grants perspective
Yeah,
or?
just like grant programs, builder programs, attracting builders, developer marketing, these
Yeah.
developer
Hmm.
incentives basically is what I'm trying to get at.
Developer incentives and then user incentives, because that's what you really need to get is developers who will then bring more traction and use it and all of that to your ecosystem. I think one thing that is important to understand, though, just to kind of zoom out a little bit, is nothing can happen in a silo. So you can't just be running a grants program and you can't have a marketing function that is working separately than the grants team. And this is what the unfortunate reality is teams are actually doing a lot of different things and they're not working as closely together. We had the advantage of doing that where we have had one team kind of do grants operations and marketing and again that's thoughts on pros and cons there, but um the developer side is just one part of it. A lot of the other angles, which actually help bring more value, are partnerships. And this is why, if you've been in the industry, the one word you hear all the time in the last year or so has been institutional. So we need to attract the institutions, and we need to get TradFi into whatever we're building. And I think that was also the natural evolution because what we are now seeing is the phase where a lot of blockchains have been able to work on and focus on and I'll name some names because I actually think there are some great fantastic examples too that I have in my mind, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done to educate traditional organizations into adoption and then the funding part. you know if you're talking about crypto as an investment, cool, that's a different story, but if you're talking about banks using blockchain, what does that mean? And thinking about all of compliance and privacy and all of the rules and regulations that come into using a tech that's so new, right? Compared to what's been done for ages. I think that's another thing to be thinking about. So there are different parts and angles that really bring um, more faith, that instill more faith into an ecosystem. And so some that have done a really good job of understanding what needs to be done to grow. I think Solana is an excellent one. They have one thing I really respect about them, and I was at Breakpoint at the end of last year, so I got to see this firsthand, was every single builder had clarity on traction. They were pitching in the way that honestly, like Web 2 founders would. And my past experience has been a lot of younger builders don't focus as much on the results and traction as much as they do on the cool tech that's being built. Whereas in that conference, all I heard was, this is the traction we have. These are the numbers we're doing. These are the transactions we've led to. And it was very sophisticated in how they were talking about it, the language, and even the advancement. I was so impressed and I thought this is incredible. And so that is great. And it comes because a lot of these projects that have traction were able to, and I got to speak to a bunch of builders who said, the Solana Foundation brand is so strong for the Solana ecosystem. They've done an excellent job in ecosystem building, which we can also get to through on the ground efforts and just a lot of different
Yeah.
angles. But even projects that got an approval for a grant and didn't actually do the thing that they got a grant for, by sharing that confirmation, by being able to highlight that, we're able to close a couple of angel deals. And you know how fundraising works. And if you're a smart founder, once you have momentum going, it's like, all right, round close in like 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And now we can get to building, and they never even needed that grant. So while getting an approval, they didn't need that funding, didn't get it, and ended up building the thing that they actually wanted to build. So things like that can be very cool to see and understand. And yeah, that's such a cool marker of success that you have an institution's approval lead to, or a foundation's approval be seen as such a strong credibility marker that you have a bunch of angels be like, you know what, we're going to put money in. So I thought that was cool. Um, Stellar Foundation has done some really interesting things too. They ran a pilot with the German government when they were giving aid to medical aid to Syrian doctors and health workers. And they ran an interesting pilot where people, because of sanctions, you couldn't actually have banks sending funding. And so through crypto, people were able to get funded in Syria. And they had an interesting off ramp. Off ramp means turning it from crypto into physical money that you can spend in your local region. And so that was a very interesting pilot. And I thought, wow, like the fact that this is being done, it's not being publicized, but there are real use cases now in play. And that was incredible. And very recently, Ethereum had an announcement during DevConnect on Bhutan using Ethereum for digital identity. And that was a very interesting one, too, to see an actual country want to adopt blockchain for your verification of profiles. And I think this is a very good one because as someone who has to go through visa challenges all the
Hmm.
time, right?
Hmm.
I have to always have 6 months of bank statements and life history.
You did tell me about this when you came to Berlin last year.
I had to come through Norway to Berlin and it was a whole thing. But, if there was an identity like profile that's verified that shows that, that they don't need to know my details and I don't have to go through this excruciating exercise, but they can see that I'm a traveler that returns, I've got sound finances, like whatever, whatever their criteria is for whatever country, right? If you can actually prove that, hey, this is cool, this works, I think that would be cool. Of course, there's other with anything that advances, there's a lot of other can of worms that opens up, which can be questionable, but we're not going to get into that. But yes, I think these three ecosystems have done a good job of thinking about growth and developers, and I think each ecosystem had a different approach in how they've done it. But I really love these use cases, and I think they are what the future means. The fact that you can transact and that you can get access to crisis areas for in currencies that they can then essentially get access to funding for, and then from a personal perspective, I think the financial use case of crypto is so great, especially for currencies that are like where there's a lot of inflation. And so I think like that is also another one. And so you're seeing a lot of ecosystems now build products and services and working with these bigger institutions to make that a reality for a lot of different regions. And I think that's fantastic.
Amazing. Amazing insights there. Awesome examples of what this can look like. Let's move into your recent updates and your announcements from this past week. I know that you have been, yeah, upgrading your platform, your strategy, your setup to Octant V2. And you mentioned it briefly in your intro, but I'm curious, like, how does Octant play in all of what we just discussed? What's the latest at Octant, and how do you tap into all the high level things that we just talked about?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So it's a big moment for us at Octant because we have a bunch of things. One part of it is the user experience. We previously were restricted with the tech that we had. And so this new upgraded version gives us a lot of flexibility to do a lot more with the funding rounds and how we run them. Before, it was a standard model 90-day periods. There was a 2-week period after those 90 days where users can take an action. And if they don't take it, their rewards get wasted. And there was like a lot of very specific restrictions that we were working with. There's been a lot of under the hood upgrades, and so yeah, this gives us a lot more flexibility. That's one thing. The other thing that is very cool though, as well, is we've got a whole new leadership. The cohort that we just announced. We have Artem, who's our new CEO. I've joined as a CMO. We have James, who's having impact, and Dennis heading legal. So we have like almost like the superstars of this industry in a way, like fantastic people. They're all so credible and have done incredible work coming together. And the mission is the same. What we can expect from this year is a lot of a lot of funding experiments, which may not sound interesting or fun because you'll be like, who the hell cares about funding experiments? But when we've had a chance to look at Ethereum and the current model of funding on what keeps Ethereum alive, and Ethereum is such a big ecosystem, right? We've noticed that there's a lot of challenges in different aspects of funding for core teams as well. So we see a lot more focus on vaults. Like that's absolutely going to be one thing we're going to be focusing on is different partners and bringing them together for funding very specific things that we are going to work on that need to get funded. So that will be one. Um, Working with a lot of different partners on rolling out their own ecosystem funding models too. So that we have a few interesting announcements that are going to come up in the next couple of weeks. And they're because a lot of ecosystems also saw our model and thought this is interesting. We want to apply this to us where we want to use vaults for yield. And then
Can you
we want to
explain
use that.
vaults for a second?
Absolutely. So vaults are basically a financial product where you put in your treasury, your crypto treasury, or your, in non-crypto terms, put in your money, and you get financial returns. And vaults are basically what the cool thing about what we've built is we have worked with a lot of different strategies and different cryptos. And so what you can essentially do is if you have, I don't know, if you have ETH, there's going to be an ETH strategy. So you can get like a percent of return. And that's what we've made easy. There really wasn't a cool user experience that would bring in a lot of the DeFi side of things to the allocation side of things. And that's always been tough. You would have to manually actually either use a DeFi platform and then you would have to manually give out grants. You can't do that at scale. We're making that possible with the products that we're building right now is actually onboarding capital, deploying capital, distributing it, and then evaluating it. So we're covering all these four angles of basically funding. And so while you may not see as many grants, you will see a lot more funding going out still, though, because when you have and you're able to justify and actually understand what the impact of that is, you're more incentivized to take these actions. And so that's going to be a big focus for us is showcasing how this can work in practice. And we thankfully have really great partners that want to see this happen. They want to see ecosystems thrive. They don't want to see um, yeah, they just don't want to see their ecosystem fail. And so that's why this is going to be one of the cool things that we do. Um, and then with the user experience, I mean, that's the other part. So far, what we built was only used by us. Now we're going to see other communities also using this model of you can lock the token and you can use it to vote for stuff and to fund whatever is happening in their ecosystem as well.
I'm curious to follow this even further, and you should come back in a couple of months and chat what's new. Um, for today, I told you before, I would love to also zoom out, like topical switch. And you know that on Chain Growth Club, kind of the vision is, to surface growth leaders like you, and to go deeper on certain growth and marketing focused topics that aren't really discussed elsewhere. And in that vein, I wanted to chat a little bit about marketing and growth and crypto in general.
Yeah.
So I know you're quite plugged in. You're in touch with the marketing cabal all the time. So yeah, why don't we chat a couple of minutes about your thoughts on a higher level about marketing and crypto. So if you had to give crypto report card, what grade? Crypto marketing, like marketing and crypto as an industry, like what would be on that grade card? What would you give? What was your
It's a very interesting time to be in crypto marketing right now because we are seeing a lot of shifts in where the industry is going. And the year started and ended, last year ended, and this year started with a mass exodus of very talented people being laid off. Like there's been all across the board has been a very strange time where some extremely talented people have been laid off. And it's just been a very weird time where a lot of companies, and I'm going to bring this back to sustainability in a way. A lot of companies had excess budgets and they hired like crazy. And now that they realize the market's not great, they're firing like crazy. And it's been absolutely horrible. So that's been the unfortunate reality starting the year with. But in terms of crypto marketing, I think it's changing because the industry is evolving and maturing. And now that, we have grown-ups that are part of the conversation in every single ecosystem, crypto marketing was definitely a lot of crypto Twitter And crypto Twitter, for anyone who's not familiar, Twitter has a subset called crypto Twitter. So if you're in the industry and you're chronically online, you are marketing to people that are also just as chronically online and engaged. And so the way that you could actually build visibility in the past was you really hustle on Twitter, and there were financial incentives to do that too, especially in the last year with InfoFi platforms. So you were incentivized to be more active, and you definitely saw a lot of people just using it, and it was very effective too. It did work for a lot of people. But
In what
now
sense, though? What did these people like? What did the people tapping into InfoFi actually achieve, though?
they had different goals. So they wanted to get visibility in front of other, again, people who are crypto native, and so that's what they would achieve, is just visibility, right, and awareness. It was the first level of marketing, if you will, um, and that's what they were focused on. Is that a great metric? Can it be gamed? 100%. The end of last year, the timeline was terrible because all I saw was AI slop and people trying to game that system to get more financial returns. So you obviously have the wrong incentives, right? And I have thoughts on that. But yeah, we saw marketing go from like interesting to like extremely lazy and then ineffective at some point. And then I think this year is going to be a lot more, and we have this joke in crypto where it's you're going from conference to conference, meeting the exact same people. So we definitely had a lot of that, right? Where we had a lot of conferences being part of the marketing strategy, and that was like sort of like the goal. But I think this year we're going to see a lot more of refinement and evolution into other platforms. So I absolutely think LinkedIn and diversifying on their long form content with Substack, even like people are going to find different avenues for getting to the same users. I think we're going to see a lot more intentional events will exist, but intentional, curated, experiential events. It's not about getting to hundreds of people. I think it'll be a lot more specific with how, and it depends on what the end goal is, right, for different ecosystems. But I think we're going to see less of that conference culture and a lot more of, if this region is important to me, then I'm going to be here and we're going to do something, but it's going to have very specific goals. It's not really just party season, which unfortunately it had become for some time. And I don't want to speak for everybody, but at least this was my observation, was like it wasn't effective and it would distract from work, because if you're traveling all the time, when are you actually doing the work? And
Yeah.
for teams that are not that big as well, like it was absolutely like it's tough. So I think we're going to see a lot more regional segregation even. We're seeing the shifts even in terms of attendance for different regions. Like there are certain conferences that would be the go-to for like North America. And I think this year is going to be very different. Already, like we're seeing, like Youth Denver used to be the go-to conference every year for the US. And this time, like Chinese New Year, Hong Kong, Consensus Hong Kong, like there's like so many overlaps with the dates. And then you have ETC, which was the big Europe conference in Ethereum and that. And I'm speaking from a very Ethereum perspective right now for a little bit, but all of these conferences being so close to each other, lack of coordination, this is going to split attendance
Yeah.
and capital budgets. And so we're seeing the effects where there's already, like this year, I think conferences are going to be a little bit different. And I think in terms of marketing, people are going to be forced to go back to traditional, even Web 2 playbooks. That's my take. I think
Hmm.
if you're trying to get to
Yeah, absolutely.
institutional, and if you're trying to get to um, just traditional B2B marketing, you will have to follow that playbook, right? And so I think we'll see a lot more of that, and I'm curious to see who's able uh, to come out as winners, because you have to be so good to get attention at a time where attention is so scarce and people are just exhausted from constantly feeling marketed to.
Yeah, and I agree very much, and I feel like also specifically since I've been focusing a lot more on like a meta view of like crypto growth and marketing, which has been probably like 2 years now around OGC and what I'm doing here. Yeah, I just feel like it's less noisy. There's the right people are still there. There's still people in the marketing cabal that are still doing their thing. I think the conversations mature. I think people are okay, so we could start now. What is crypto marketing actually, right? So this is like a lot of different things. Is it crypto as an asset class? Is it crypto as a technology to replace financial rails? Is it crypto as a platform? And within that, is it infra? Is it pro? Like, I feel like it's much more nuanced. I think this is the word that I was looking for. Like, it's much more nuanced. People understand. It's not like this monolithic thing. Oh yeah, like it's like crypto. I feel like this is a really healthy signal. And with the next phase, and when people are a little more hopeful again, I feel like we're gonna come out of that stronger. That's my take
Absolutely.
here.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I like that. I think it is healthy. And I think we are going to see change, and change is tough. I think there's also the factor of there have been builders and talent that's left for AI, right? And so that's very exciting. There's a lot more that's available and that is possible. I've been speaking to builders and developers that are quite talented and who've been saying we have accelerated our pace of what we ship because we now have all these agentic tools, and just the pace of how fast a lot of these tools are growing. It feels like having an entire division with people working with you. So even just seeing what our team has been able to learn and adopt from in the pace that we're changing things, it's really, really cool. And it wasn't possible before. So I think that might be part of it. But you're right, it is healthy, it is great. And it's always an exciting time to be in crypto because things are always changing. And I love that. But I also think it keeps us on our toes, because
Yeah,
to do really well, you can't hide behind vanity
absolutely.
metrics.
Last question from me: what has caught your interest within Web3 marketing, culture, campaigns, growth, outside of what you guys do at Octant? Like, what caught your attention? What rabbit hole did you fall into? What I don't know, Twitter fight did you follow? Like, what caught your attention lately on the marketing and culture front in crypto? Anything?
Um, this is a spicy one, but this is very recent, so I have recency bias right now. But I do think that well, there's two actually. One, I think Tomash stepping down from the EF. That's
Hmm.
been a big one. Very unexpected. So yeah, that's definitely been one, and it's been really great to see his leadership for the past year and a half or so. So that was cool, but also again very unexpected. And then the other thing is the debate about where should the next DevCon be. This is very Ethereum centric too,
Hmm.
but there's two different approaches. Like the Solana ecosystem has centralized organization in how they do their bigger events, and they pick big hubs. So last year it was in Abu Dhabi. This year it's going to be in London. Whereas DevCon has historically been very different, both because of what it stands for and the goal of it. But it's been very different venues and just places. And so community proposals can be sent in, and the way that the process works is if you thought, hey, this next DevCon should happen in Germany or in Berlin, you could propose that and share your reasoning for why you think. And there's a little bit of a criteria where there should be an existing developer ecosystem, there should be attendance and whatnot. But this is a big event that attracts so many people, right? Thousands of people. So I saw a lot of differing opinions on what is the right approach. Should you go to big hubs that already have capital, or should you go to regions that traditionally would not be considered and venture out? And, there's two different takes on it. So that was one that I
What is
saw.
yours? I have mine. I actually even I think I forgot where else I tweeted about, like, somebody. Who was it? Damn, somebody tweeted about comparing Breakpoint to the Ethereum conferences. I forgot who it was, but I have my I have my I'm in the camp of top down executing and kind of going where the traction is. What's your take?
I think it depends on what the end goal is. I
Okay,
love
very
seeing every.
diplomatic.
No, not diplomatic. Okay, if you're trying to get institutions and capital, you should host a big conference where there is capital and there are decision makers. That is important. You cannot ignore that. But if you are trying to, if your values are accessibility and openness, and you're trying to think about values that are more altruistic in ways, and your goal is decentralization, you will do things in the way that Ethereum is doing things, right?
Yeah.
Which is you will open it up, you will find a different place every time. To me, I think wherever you can get Visa access, That's the most important thing. And it comes from seeing in Argentina when DevConnect happened. Sure, logistics wise, very tough. Like I was hearing some of the stories about stuff that had to be imported, screens, whatever. Like there are a lot of, even from a vendor and existing infrastructure perspective, it's hella hard to organize such a big event for so many people in a region, that's different. But when they worked with the government to get visa access, let me tell you, this is the first time where there are like thousands of people who have felt this mental ease of like, actually, we don't have to go through this extremely annoying process and we can literally just attend and it's fine. And they had a form, they had a whole, process where, but it was so easy. It was not like how usually visa processes are. So to me, capital and where influential structures are, sure, but also where can you actually get accessibility? And people don't always realize like it is tough to also get, just keep it the bigger masses in mind and think about how can you get your best talent to places in a way that's easy. So maybe this is not the best business decision, but I think this is my personal
Yeah,
take.
yeah, and maybe
So,
there's also a world where both approaches should live in parallel, and maybe that's a good
yeah, we
thing
have
ultimately.
100%. We have some of the best talent in Africa, in the global South, and in the Middle East and South Asia, in LATAM countries. We're seeing adoption already in these regions, right?
Yeah,
So when you lock access unintentionally, because you're not thinking about how do these people even attend, forget the money part. People can figure out how to get there financially, but when you're not thinking about that accessibility, it's tough. So I'm constantly thinking about that. And then from a work perspective, like the Middle East is home turf for me, right? So when I went to Breakpoint. I was actually there for my family, like, but Abu Dhabi's right there. So, I drove over with my husband and he was attending. So I got to attend there. And even within the 2 days, the kinds of conversations, because everyone who was anybody and the timing of it was excellent, I liked that approach that this is a hub that's open to crypto adoption. And so you're able to attract the right people. It's all in vicinity. And it was so easy. It wasn't tough. And
yeah,
so I think that was really cool. And I liked that approach a lot. So, um, sometimes you do need a bit of centralization,
yeah, yeah.
and opinions. And I think there's probably a mix that's healthy that can still happen. So,
Amazing, amazing thoughts there. Let's wrap it up, Michelle. Where do people find you? Where should they follow you?
every platform I am active on. So whether it's Instagram, where I am Mashal Waqar with 2 R's at the end. I'm Arlery on Twitter, Arlery, and I'm also active on LinkedIn, although I'm a lot more passive in engagement instead of posting stuff. And LinkedIn used to be one of my favorite. It was never my favorite platform, but I was very active on it. But I'm getting back to it too. So any of those work wherever you are active naturally, you will probably find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That was an amazing conversation, as expected. Super insightful. Loved it. And yeah, I hope to catch up soon sometime right here.
Thank you, Norman. Excited to catch up as well. Have a good
Thank you,
one.
Michelle. Bye bye.
Bye.